Welcome to the Empowered Podcast, episode number 93. Today, if you want to be a speaker or you want to take your speaking skills to the next level, you will absolutely want to tune in to the rest of this episode where I talk to Tracy Goodwin, who is also known as the Red Sweater Lady. She's been coaching actors, singers, voiceover artists on how to speak better, how to have more vocal variety, how to overcome their fears, how to tell stories, all of the things that are the ingredients for an excellent speech. We're going to talk about those today. And I asked some of the questions that are relevant to me. In my preparation for going on stage at Podcast Movement, I wanted to know how I could capture an audience and captivate the room. And you're going to hear all about that in today's episode. Also, I want to encourage you to check out the blog this week. My most recent blog post is how to work on your business instead of just in your business. And there's a big difference there. And if you're not reading the blog, you're missing out on about half of the content that I produce. All of the tools, tips, tricks, reviews, resources, comparison articles, equipment, all those kinds of things. You're missing out on that if you only listen to the podcast. So I want to encourage you to go to ellorywells.com and check out the blog as well. Now, I'm also making that a little bit easier. I want to do something that I've never really done before. I am adding an audio blog. So if you are the listening type, I've had this request multiple times, and I'm going to do my very best to stick with it. But in iTunes, in Stitcher, hopefully in the next couple weeks, you'll be able to find it. But if you go to ellorywells.com/blog and you go back to the last couple blog posts, you'll be able to listen to those as well as read them or follow along if you would like to do that. But let's go right into today's episode about how to capture your audience and captivate the room with Tracy Goodwin. Thank you for tuning into this episode. I'm here with my guest today, Tracy Goodwin, and Tracy's going to teach us how we can get up on stage or go in front of the room and captivate our audience and really, I reverse that, really capture an audience and captivate the room. Let's welcome to the show, Tracy Goodwin. How are you doing, Tracy?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I am doing just fine. Sorry, I got the words, the captivate and the capture. I knew kind of what I wanted to say, but I got them out of order, so I apologize.
Hey, you had me engaged.
There we go.
I didn't even catch it until you said something, so it was great. Now I'm
There
glad
go.
to be here.
So I'm excited to have you on the show today because just this morning, Tracy, I was sitting. So we're recording this on a Thursday, and every Thursday for the last year, actually just over a year, I've been going to a local coffee shop, the La Madeleine here in Round Rock, and I go and I usually get to work done, write blog posts, respond to emails. I have done a couple web chats, but this morning I was reading, I think it's Talk Like Ted by Carmine Gallo. I know he wrote it, and I am preparing my speech for the PMX, the Podcast Movement X, like TEDx Talk, a Podcast Movement.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sitting there reading the book, and I'm thinking I've got this awesome call with Tracy here in just a few hours. So I am looking forward to learning from you how I can capture the attention of my audience and captivate the room. And like I said, I am honored to have you and excited to learn from you.
Well, that's so cool. Now, are you talking about the Podcast Movement in Dallas in a week?
I am.
You're speaking there?
I am.
Well, I'm going to be there. I'm going to come and cheer you on.
Well, thank you. I don't know the time. It'll be on Friday. They have blocked off a series of rooms. I don't. The details are probably online at podcastmovement.com, but I don't know the time and I don't know the room. But my talk is going to be blogging versus podcasting and creating your digital media empire.
Oh wow!
And my background, my start was in blogging.
Okay.
And I'm going to go into some of the details on that on the talk, and just how we can, tell stories, grab
Yeah.
people's attention, and incorporate different types of media into this business that we're doing, that you've built. I know you have training courses, you have downloadable resources, you have one-on-one coaching, and I talk to so many podcasters, Tracy, like I know you're doing, who don't really consider blogging. They think it's kind of old-fashioned. They don't really need to do it, and I want to kind of encourage them that I wouldn't be where I am. I wouldn't have the business that I have without blogging and podcasting. So that's what I'm going to talk about on Friday. But enough about me.
That's awesome.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it. I'm nervously excited. I'm very introverted, and
really? I would have not thought that just from hearing you.
I get that a lot. I fake it really well. But I'm sure you work with all types too. Introverts, extroverts, people who with all sorts of experience. If you had to come out of the gate right away, right at the very beginning of our call today, what is one essential thing that we have to do to captivate a room and capture an audience, and what is something that we need to avoid, like the worst mistake that you could possibly make?
Okay. All right, here we go. I that question, that's just a great question, and I have to kind of flip through the files really quick because coming from me, I really, all of it's so important. It's like asking the heart surgeon what's the most important part of the heart surgery,
Right?
But
Do I eat healthy? Do I exercise?
right,
Which one is it, right?
right. But I will tell you, and yes, marketers, I drive marketing people crazy because they say, Who's your target market? Everybody, because
Anybody who doesn't want to look like an idiot when they get on stage, right?
well, the voice is the power piece. And so anybody that opens their mouth and speaks, that's my market. But one of the biggest problems or biggest stumbling blocks or biggest things that gets in the way that can really do the most good is breathing.
I would agree.
I see it from executives to actors, and there's so many benefits from it. Benefits that people probably are not even thinking about. I mean, you can put an actor in front of a camera and have them deliver dialogue and they're not breathing, and then you can have them deliver it connected to the breath, and their entire face changes on camera. It's like shape shifting, and it's because it literally relaxes those muscles. So you're going into it, you're torqued up, you're nervous. That stands to reason. That makes perfect sense. The first byproduct is that it's going to relax you. But the second part is the breathing. If you want to do anything with your voice, if you want to be even remotely, have remote variety or anything like that, the breath is the power. It's like the fuel to the car. It's, you want a quarter of a tank or you want a full tank. But, if you have a full tank, you can go way further than if you have a quarter of a tank. But the really cool part, and this is what people, I think, don't even think about, it creates the vulnerability. The breathing connects the body and the mind and the words all together. It's the glue that holds everything together. And when you are breathing, your throat opens up, your words come out, the variety comes in, you're connected to what you're saying, and that is what touches lives. It's that vulnerability that if you don't breathe, it's really almost impossible to create. So, so that was a really, I told you, watch me, I'll go on a tangent, but people have to breathe. And, the studies on breathing are absolutely staggering, that we just literally don't breathe. And Americans are the worst. We literally have trained, of course we breathe. We would die if we didn't.
but not necessarily on purpose, right?
Right.
Or with intention.
Right. I tell my clients all the time, the first thing you got to do, catch yourself not breathing. And they come back to me and they're absolutely dumbfounded. They're sitting in traffic, they're not breathing. They're on the subway, they're not breathing. They're in a meeting, they're not breathing. They're literally holding their breath. And that's really what we've become. We get, so much stress, so much information, so much bad news, so much of this, so much of that, that we literally have trained our bodies to almost hold in the breath and prepare for the worst. So, you literally have to retrain.
I noticed that a lot, Tracy. And I was just doing I'm starting an audio blog, trying to make my website more like cross media, audio, video, so you and just in and text. And I was doing an audio blog, and I noticed that I will talk until I run out of breath, and I'm like,
Yeah.
and you can hear that, and yeah, I try to leave some of that in, because on one hand it's kind of the natural, unedited. On the other, it's not quite professional, and I couldn't agree more. And even Lauren Gagioli, who I don't know that you would come across in what you do, but she teaches SAT courses, and I've had her on the show a couple times, and she and I talked about this exact thing, about the transition and for her it's editing,
Hmm.
editing out those videos. For me, it's editing out the podcast, and for you and your clients and what you notice, it's being on stage, being excited, having that adrenaline pumping, and then running
Yeah.
running out of breath, and then taking that big gulp. But you're also right in just the amount of emotion that a sigh or a dramatic pause can add to a talk. And I think a lot of amateurs, at least something that I've worked hard to do, is being comfortable with the silence
Yeah.
and giving and then I guess that'd be a good opportunity to breathe as well.
Right. Well, and I love what you just said. It's audible sounds is what I call it. All day long we make audible sounds. We sigh, we pause, we smack our lips or do whatever. But then
I have a bad habit of
do
that.
you're a lip smacker?
Yeah, right before I say
Yeah.
something, I notice it all the time. There's a little spike
Huh.
in the audio,
Ah.
and bad habit for me. Yeah, I'm guilty.
Well, everybody has something. It's their idiosyncratics. Everybody has something, and but what we tend to do when we're nervous is we either maybe we have taken in air, but a lot of times we'll take in air and exhale it, and then try to deliver as absolutely much information as we can, either on one breath or with no breath. And so it's literally about retraining, building up that capacity, just like you would build up muscles going to the gym, and not feeling that need to, I got to hurry up and get through this line because I'm going to run out of breath and I'm nervous and I'm going to get through. I'm done. Now I can breathe, slowing down, stopping, doing what you need to do, and breathing, because the end result is going to be so much better, you know.
And well, you talk a lot about the importance of your voice and improving your voice, and mistakes people make with their voice. And can we go into some of those kinds of things and how that applies to maybe this breath? Maybe it's something you normally talk about on its own, the voice versus, or not including breathing, but how does all of that play together?
Well, that's a loaded question right there. You kind of gave me the green light. Um,
No softballs here. Hard, tough
well,
questions.
I mean, breathing is a huge part of it, and breathing is a huge part of it primarily because sometimes people know that they don't do it, but sometimes people are like, "What are you talking about? Of course I breathe." Okay, yes, you breathe, but you don't breathe to really utilize the power piece. And that's why I think that the voice is so important, because I think it's where, it's the power piece. But what happens is, like I know you had said, what's something that you want to avoid, or what's one of the bad things that happens? Well, people tend to flatline. That is definitely one of the things, and it happens, it happens to actors, it happens to podcasters, it happens to business people, it happens to presenters. They get up there, they get nervous, maybe they don't have technique, maybe, you know, maybe whatever's going on, and they get really bogged down in their words, and then everything gets the same value, and so everything sounds like this. Nothing's any different than anything else, kind of like Bueller. Bueller. There's no vocal variety. And vocal variety is, well, it's essential, one, because it creates the unpredictability. And that's what we're looking for. In life, we're unpredictable. So, that's if the minute we start getting predictable, like the guy that says Bueller, Bueller, our audience is going to check out, because our brain is already telling us every 90 seconds to check out. That's what the studies say. So if you're not captivating me, and my brain says, hey, why don't you play Angry Birds, on your iPhone? What do you think I'm going to do? So that variety and all of those elements of variety become really, really crucial, but they're also clues for the audience. I think one of the biggest problems is, as a speaker, I even see it with actors. I see it with, people having conversations. We forget that people don't know what we know.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we'll go to that podcast convention, and there may not be a lot of me there. There'll be a few, but there'll be a lot of podcasters there. But we could sit
Mm-hmm.
each of you side by side, and even though you're in the same field, you don't know what each other knows. So, speakers will come to me, and they're in a tech field or this field, and they're just rattling stuff off, and they're not giving me any clues. Where is the value? Where are the stress words? What's important here? And ultimately, how do you want me to feel?
So I think I'm guilty of that too. I know I have a lot of areas that I can always be improving on. I've had some speaking experience. I've done Toastmasters. I've been on stage in front of a few thousand people back in high school,
Oh,
actually.
that's great.
But I feel like I sound somewhat monotone, even when I feel like I have a lot of energy. So I actually converted to standing up
Mhm.
when I podcast. Right now I'm
Mhm.
standing up, and I think I get on. Oddly enough, it comes back to breathing. I think I get more emphasis
Mhm.
and more animated with my arm. I'm over here waving my
Yeah.
arms. Nobody can see it but me. What are some techniques that you would suggest to people who need that vocal variety, which is actually a Toastmasters lesson in one of the first things? I don't
Mhm.
know if you've ever done
Mhm.
Toastmasters,
Mhm.
but how can I get into this habit to where it becomes natural, to where I have the high points and the low points and the faster speed and slower speed, so that I can really, like you said, captivate somebody who's listening, either on their phone in their car with a podcast, or sitting in the audience? How do I do that so I can become to where it's more natural to
Right.
me?
Right. I totally have you here. And, everybody's teaching perspective is different. Everybody's learning perspective is different. The method that I teach is, it's based in technique. It's been crafted over the years into what works. That's still technique. But I think technique can get a bad rap, because if you say technique, a lot of times people think, well, I don't want to sound like this. I don't want to sound fake. So I think it becomes important to find that blend that also meets up with organic. Like, and I think that's what you're ultimately saying. What can we do
Yeah.
so that we add in all this cool stuff, but we sound really natural? And that's organic. So for your organic person, their approach, is a little bit different. But for a technique approach, which I prefer, because you can lay it in and make it part of the muscle memory, anything that's in the muscle memory you can draw up. Everything we've ever experienced is in our muscle memory. You're in a car wreck when you were 23. When you're 44 and you hear screeching brakes, your body will pull that up. So that's what I like about technique. So first of all, so we have to lay that in. But first of all, I find a lot that people aren't even quite clear on what variety means. A lot of times people confuse their overall pattern with variety, or they might confuse pace, going faster or slower, as variety. And so, variety, when you talk about vocal variety, I see it as a lot of pieces. We set a core volume, we set a core pace. And then with that, I work on a scale of 1 to 10. 1, you're dead. 10, you're an auctioneer. So, we want a 5, right? So pace-wise, we want a 5. Volume, we don't want anybody yelling. We don't want anybody really quiet. So I say, get set at a 5. And then you can add in shades of louder and softer, shades of faster and slower, shades of higher and lower, elongation, which is one of my favorite tools, and then set up the really great stuff with a pause. Then we want to stress the pieces that we really want to drive home to the audience, and we want to go back and we want to stress them with all those pieces of variety, rather than we say, okay, stress your words. Okay, I'll stress them. That's what we do. What about getting quiet? What about taking all of those variety elements and rolling them in along with stress? So that's, when you say to me, variety, just even the word, that's what I think of as variety. And from a really technical perspective, you can take your script, you can take your material, you can take your notes, and you say everything a different way out loud. Welcome to the show, everyone. Okay, that sounds one way. Welcome to the show, everyone. You see, and you try out a bunch of different ways. And as you try them out, you're going to come up with what feels good, what sounds natural, what makes sense to you, what makes sense to your audience. But if you only think it in your head, you're never putting it in your muscle memory. So you talk to an actor, you talk to a speaker, and they say, "Oh, it sounded so great in my head." Well, did you say it out loud? No. Well, that's why. You can think it, but you have to do it. And I think that's kind of a lot of what Toastmasters is about. It's getting up there and doing it and trying it, learn it, apply it, try it kind of concept.
Yeah, I just did the lip smacking thing before I started talking. Yeah, you did it.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I was talking to my local Toastmasters club about is looking at these first 10 lessons like your personal trainer. It's not just, hey, let's go through the motions, because we had a girl who was in like 2 or 3 months. She was 6 lessons in, and that's just really fast. She was just racing through them, and honestly, I didn't feel like she was improving much from one to the next. It was just like, I need to get it checked off. I need to get all of these done. And I was like, guys, look at this like a personal training lesson.
Mm-hmm.
In this one, the point is to practice. I mean, they're called they're very they're called what they want you to practice, like vocal variety, or speaking with your body speaks, I think is actually the title of one thing. Look at these things as practice modules. The whole point is to move around in this one. The whole point in this one is to use vocal variety. And I look at those things as things that I need to do. And is the best thing for speakers in general, podcasters on stage, what have you, is it to practice? Do we need to be recording ourselves and listening to it back? what would you say?
Well, my thought on this is going to maybe blow your mind, but when people work with me, I don't let them listen to themselves.
Okay.
And not initially, maybe later on, but initially you've listened to yourself for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. What you do is going to sound and feel right. If we push beyond that and add in some variety or adjust an accent or bring your sounds more forward, it's going to feel wrong and it's going to sound weird. But the end result is right. So I think it becomes more about learn the skill, of course, first, in my opinion, awareness. Okay, I'm sounding pretty flat. Or, oh boy, I talk too quiet. Or, oh, I go too fast. You know, awareness. What do you need to work on? Then learn the skill, apply it, make sure you've got it right, and then practice it and practice it and get it set so that it becomes the new top layer. So that when you go to speak this next time, this new top layer comes up where you've laid in all this variety and it comes up automatic. You don't even have to think about it. So that's kind of, my theory, my methodology. But I do think practice is essential. And, and I know I keep talking about actors because I guess probably because I'm working with a big core of actors right now. I work with lots of different types of people, but it was really fascinating to me. Two of them came up doing a 4-week project, and two of them stood to talk to me Sunday at the third week. And the girl had been with me 3 weeks, and she said, I don't know that any of this is I don't know that any of this is working. I don't know that I'm getting it. And I said, "Well, have you practiced?" I've been really busy. And I said, "Okay, well,
Well, that's why it's not
yeah,
working.
exactly.
Come on.
Exactly." Literally, the boy standing there right next to her, he'd only been with me 2 weeks. He said, "I've been practicing every day. I've been practicing 30 minutes a day. This is what I've been doing. Do you think that's about right? Because I just got cast in a film today. So I really think we're on to something here."
Yeah.
I mean, and the thing is you don't have to practice forever. I think sometimes because of our time constraints, we think, I can't spend the rest of my life practicing. Well, I don't think you have to. I haven't necessarily laid in new voice principles in 30 years because they're there,
But at the same time, though, I think we're always practicing. I think the really excellent people may not ever stop practicing. And what's coming to mind right now, Tracy, is what's his name that was in American Sniper, and he has this really what was I guess it's technically a Texas accent, even though I'm from Texas and don't talk like that guy. But what's that actor's name? And
Chris
just how
Klein,
much time?
Chris, or was that the sniper guy? You know what? Chris Klein,
Chris Kyle
Kyle.
was
He,
the
right,
character.
right, right.
What's that guy?
Ri-
He was in.
oh man,
Neither one of us can
I
remember, and
know,
I'm not
I
I'm not
know.
gonna pull it up on the computer to look, but
He's
he
great.
he had to
Bradley
practice
Russell,
talking. Bradley
Bradley
Cooper. There you
Cooper.
go.
There we go.
There you go. There we got it. And how well he did in that role, and how much practice he had to have put in to do some of these things. And I wonder, and I'd love to get your opinion. Do you think the pros, the I don't know if Mel Gibson's a bad example after his crazy years, but the Clint Eastwoods, all of these people who are just box office gold, do you think they continue to practice even after making $15-20 million a movie?
Well, I'm going to answer that, and I've got a great answer for that. But I get your point, and I guess what I was thinking in my mind when I said you don't have to practice forever, I think I was thinking as far as learning the new skills. You lay in the new skills. You've never done variety, so you lay it in, you learn it. But yeah, oh yeah, you're always practicing forever. And I just recently had the opportunity to work with one of the top on-set acting coaches out in LA. He's worked with all the big guys. He worked with Heath Ledger, Matt Damon, just a ton of them. And he wrote me a letter, and he wrote, it was just a reference letter. And in it, I was much more excited about what I'm about to say to you than even the praise that he gave me. He said, the difference between A-list actors and anybody else is that they are constantly in voice training. They are constantly improving their voice. They are constantly making the voice a priority piece.
Yeah.
So the answer is yes. The answer is yes. And
Go ahead.
no, I think that's so cool. I mean, especially as a voice teacher, of course, I loved that.
Well, I had a girl last night basically fire me from coaching her. She was in one of my mastermind groups. She wasn't a coaching client, and she just wasn't kind of like the girl one of the two that
Yeah.
was standing in front of
Mhm.
you. She's like, I'm just not feeling it. I'm not feeling like I'm making a whole lot of progress. And I look back over her time and I'm thinking she's not doing what you're
Right.
talking about. She wasn't practicing. She wasn't doing some of the things that I was suggesting or coaching or telling her to do. And I was feeling kind of down about it.
Mhm.
It's been kind of a frustrating couple days for me. And then today, one of my friends messages me. See, I did the lip click again. One of those bad habits we're talking about. Whenever I talk to people about all these bad habits, I find myself really
Oh, yes, super,
doing
super.
them.
Yes, and being hyper aware of it.
Exactly. Well, this guy messaged me and he said, "Hey, I want to buy you this ticket to go to this conference in Austin in September." I was like, "Wow, you don't have to do that. Thank you." He's like, "Well, I want to do this." He wants to spend. He's already paying me. He wants to spend money to buy me a ticket, and he says, and I don't have it in front of me, but he basically said, because A, I want you to be there, and B, as a thank you for all of the things that you've helped me with to this point.
Mhm.
And it's just it's the exact same thing to
Mhm.
me as your two actors.
Mhm.
One who less than 12 hours before says, I'm done, I'm canceling, I'm dropping out, and some other things that I won't mention. And she just wasn't seeing results. And here's this guy who is doing the practice, putting in the
Mhm.
work, not only seeing results, but wants to thank me even more. And I give them basically, for the most part, the same
Right.
things, the same activities to do, have the same
Mhm.
conversations, and of course, it's the same me that they have access to, and it is all about the practice. It's about putting in the work, and I talk to so many beginners, and I'm sure you do too, Tracy, who they just think, oh, I'm gonna take a couple lessons, I'm gonna read a couple
Mhm.
books, I'm gonna listen to a couple webinars, and then boom, I'm gonna be
Yeah. I'm gonna
successful.
be a millionaire. I'm
Yeah,
gonna be famous.
and they quit, and maybe they had talent, maybe they didn't, but you'll never know if you quit after just a couple
Well,
months.
I think that, several things come to mind. One, and you read about this, if you study anything on any level about anything, you read that everything is a lot of hard work. Sure, we see the part when
That's
they
so
made it
true.
to the top. We didn't see the part when they were living in their car, you know? So that's a big part of it. But don't you feel like, and I see this in voice work, and I bet you see this in coaching, some people just aren't ready to get vulnerable.
Yeah, people aren't ready to do the
Yeah,
work or admit that they need
right.
help in a certain area, and I don't, necessarily talk about all the things that I mess up, but I realized I had to change parts of my personality if I wanted my business to grow.
Sure.
And one of them was I have to be less sarcastic online. People
Interesting.
think I'm being a jerk,
Uh,
and I'm over
uh,
here thinking, man, that's pretty
yeah,
funny.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well,
And
yeah, yeah. And the
just
voice is so much like that too, though.
exactly. In an interview for a job a few years ago. I was told I was deadpan because I answered a stupid question with a smart ass response, and the guy didn't get that it was a joke, and that's that vocal
Mhm,
variety and
mhm,
that
mhm.
inflection, some of those other things that I've had to learn to add in so that people who aren't sitting across the table from me know that I'm not being mean. I'm actually just joking.
Right, right, right. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that, certainly with voice, that opens up a whole can of scary, in a lot of ways, because as long as I can control it, as long as I can gauge it, as long as I don't, have to really put myself out there, I'm good. But now you want me to get louder? Well, wait a minute. People will hear me. I think the mouth is I think the voice is the most vulnerable thing we have, because the minute we open our mouth and the words come out, we're instantly setting ourselves up to be judged. What if you don't,
Do you
what if you don't like what I say? What if you don't like how I sound? You know?
do you think that's why the fear of public speaking is so prevalent? I mean,
Absolutely. Absolutely. I guess I've done this for 30 years, really. And so I've really paid close attention to addressing fear of public speaking, because I never had it. I started winning speaking awards when I was 12, you know, but I literally over the years watched it hone down to about 3, break I'm afraid of speaking. Okay, let's address that. What are you afraid of? And 90% of the time, what people are going to think of me,
mm.
which branches into, what if they don't think I'm smart? What if they don't think I know what I'm talking about? What if they think I'm doing, messing up? What if they think I sound awful? So it's really the number one, so you can break it down even further. Yeah, I'm afraid of public speaking, but what are you afraid of?
So how do we overcome that? If you could condense down to, I know it'd be almost impossible. If you can give a tip to attack each one of those, smart enough, well spoken enough, expert enough, how do we overcome that?
Well, I think I can sum it up pretty quickly in a two-pronged process that I use. And I think first and foremost, I use this phrase called run to the roar. And I use that in life. I use that in everything, because we get the fear so big in our minds, that fear, whatever it is, and it can be public speaking, it could be anything, it could be flying, it could be a million things. It's so big that it's like a roaring lion that we think we can never ever conquer. And if we just get over it and run to it, we see it's a little kitten. So I think that's part of it. Easier said than done. So I think that you have,
Yeah.
I think that you have to then start pinpointing, okay, what are you afraid of? Well, I'm afraid I'm going to mess up and forget everything. I'm afraid of whatever it is. You break down the exact fear, you address it, you talk about it, you put it into the reality of, could that really happen? Sometimes the answer is, okay, you're right. No, that's never going to happen. Sometimes the answer is yes. And then you create a plan. Okay, you may forget everything. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to create notes that work for you flawlessly without a hitch. That under any circumstances, those notes will save you. So you have a plan. You have a fear, but you have a plan, so you're not out there just completely disconnected waiting to fall. With no plan, you're just kind of out there waiting for it to go bad. And we don't know that that's going to happen, you know. And then of course, practice and preparation. I worked with a woman, pretty big deal, and she did not, again, back to the practice. She just was so busy in her career, she never could practice and she never could prepare. She would go off the cuff. And so every week we were dealing with the same problem. I'm all over the place, and, I can't, make a straight thought, and I'm given too much information. Well, did you get it organized? Because that's the plan. If you're delivering too much information, you got to call it down, get it organized, and line it up in notes you can follow. Well, no, I was really busy. You see,
I
there's,
hear that a lot too.
yeah, there is, as Marie Forleo says, everything is figure outable. And I believe that there is a solution for just about everything if you slow down and find it, or create it and then implement it, you know?
And I want to get back to that I was actually writing down a couple questions so I didn't forget them, and I want to come back to that. But before I forget, who's the best speaker that you have ever heard or seen?
Oh man, you caught me off guard on that one.
I know, throwing those
I
curveballs.
know you are a curveball guy. Ah, oh wow. I like Brene Brown a lot
Okay.
because she really can. She speaks to the heart. She speaks from the heart, and she speaks to the heart, and she really has an understanding as a speaker and a person about affecting people through the senses to encourage them to change.
Mm. Can you make a good speech by let me back up a second. In Carmine Gallo's book, it talks about the most effective TED Talks are the ones that touch the heart as well as the mind. Are those equally important in your mind? Do you agree with Carmine, or is one of those more important than the other?
I agree 100%, but I'll give you my but on that. The voice and the words must work together. If it is only the words and they are disconnected from the voice and the body, they do not have the power to reach in and touch my heart. It
What do you
is
mean by that?
it is if I'm just delivering words to you and I'm telling you about this car crash that I was in, and it was really bad, and there were ambulances everywhere, and but I'm not really putting any inflection in it. I'm disconnected from it. The story will still impact you. But what if I use my voice to bring that to life through taking those adjectives and laying in the sensory piece so that you know how hot it was out on that highway that day? That gives me more power to affect your senses. Your senses make you feel something and go, oh, wow. I remember that time when I was, out in Arizona. Oh God, that thing was hot. And we were out on that pavement and the bike was over. Boom. We have just connected on a sensory level. So I think that the words I think, yes, the mind, absolutely. But I think the body and the heart as well. I think,
Is it a 50-50? You got to pay attention to them. I'm an analytical
yeah, you
person, and
are.
I have to I have to remember that this isn't just like for my talk on Friday here in just a couple weeks. I have to remember this isn't nobody necessarily cares about the statistics or the numbers or anything like that. They want to know the experience. They want to know the story. And I've got a great storytelling question for you here in a second, but can you deliver an all heart topic without touching the mind, and vice versa? Because also Carmine says great speeches are only, I'm going to butcher the paraphrase, but great speeches are really only as great as the actions that they lead people to take afterward. How does that incorporate with what you're talking about? And I love what you're saying. How does that fit in, or even does it?
Yeah, you're speaking to the voice movement integration person. So I'm going to have to go with a 60-40 or a 70-30 split on that. And the analytics might get a little frustrated with me. A lot of
We'll
times,
make it work.
a lot of times I'll say the words are the most important thing and they're the least important thing.
Mm.
Because if you get bogged down in them and speak words at me, you're a talking head. Words cannot necessarily touch me. It's what you do with them. It's how you bring them to life. You know, I'll tell you just this really quick story. I learned this years ago when my son was very little, and I living up in New York City, and a man hired me, a millionaire actually, very wealthy man, hired me to put books on tape for him. And I was so excited about this gig. And every Friday the FedEx envelope would come and I'd go to recording. And do you know what all the books were for 2 years? Science books. And he wanted them interesting and he wanted them exciting. And he wanted them entertaining and captivating and engaging. And I was talking about, the molecular level of whatever. But I brought those books to life. So, I think that they are both very, very important. I can't remember what the last part of that part that you asked me about. I do definitely, absolutely believe that that you can, my question is always, do you want to tell stories or do you want to tell stories that change lives? And I think that's what basically the point of that was. There's no point. I mean, I guess there is a point, but you've got to get people to take an action. Or were your words for naught? I don't know. Maybe they were, maybe they weren't. But why is it my brother-in-law has told me the same stories for 17 years, 437 times, and I can't recall any of them in this moment? Yet I can recall a story from a stranger that I heard 15 years ago in exact detail. It's what they brought it to life.
Well, so getting to the details of that, this is another question that I would want to know. Of course, that's why I'm asking it. In preparation for someone going on stage or performing a role, and they have their speech, do you write it out or doing bullet points in high-level topics, or do you write it all out and memorize it?
Okay, that's a great question. That's a fantastic question, and I see it with every speaker and business person and webinar giver and podcaster I've ever worked with in my career. Wonderful question. First of all, I think you do what works for you. A lot of people are like, no, you got to have index cards. Well, you know what? I can't work with index cards because I can't remember to flip them. So I have to come up with something that works for me. I think you come up with what works for you that makes you feel the most comfortable, and then you try to pull away from it. So an example, I'll have a speaker come in to prep, and they'll have that thing that sucker's written out, and they want to read it word for word. Okay, we'll do that today. But let's see if we can't pull that back a little. Could we turn that into extended sentences? Okay, we'll try that. Because it becomes a crutch, and you actually know so much more than you give yourself credit for. So I like to try to pull people back away from full scripts as much as possible, and almost everybody comes to me with fully written out, memorized word for word, and I get every one of them away from that. And the reason why is because then it goes right back to being about the words. It's about the retrieval. And oh my gosh, I don't want to forget a word. And what if I forget how, that line, because I'm a little shaky on my memorization on that line. So then all the flair goes out the window because you're focusing on retrieving the words and getting the words exactly right.
Well, let me ask you a selfish question.
Sure.
Because I noticed myself doing this with Toastmasters. I have this ability, just like I said, in June, my junior year of high school, I did a one-act play and then got into, so we had to memorize everything. And then I got into doing prose and poetry, solo things, and did that all through my senior year. And I've always been in sales, always talked to people on the phone, talked to people in person. And over time, I've kind of built this ability to talk to people. And it doesn't really make me nervous. And I can be given a talking point. Like I loved being on a panel at Podcast Movement last year. I was on the panel with some fantastic people. And there wasn't a question that I couldn't talk about easily. But I noticed myself going into situations where I had to do some sort of presentation, and I didn't really prepare because I knew that I could take a topic, I could take an idea and talk about it for 3 or 4 minutes. And I felt like that was the crutch, not the over memorization and I can't get off the page, but almost the exact opposite. What kind of suggestion would you have for me?
Yeah, and I'm like you. I'll go to teach a workshop and I I'm going to say I don't prepare. I don't mean it like that. Of course I prepare, but I don't have a note with me. I know the order I'm going to do, and I think that a lot of that is just it's a skill set. Some people can think off the cuff, some people can't. I mean, I think we're all just different. So I think it's a wonderful skill set, but it also sounds to me like a big part of it is you've been practicing a really long time. You know, if you've been really, because think about it, you've been doing this since high school. And with every single time you do it, it gets easier and you get better at it. So I guess where my confusion is the question, how do you not do that? Or is that a bad thing? I guess I'm not exactly sure on the question about that
Okay.
style. So maybe you could help me there.
And maybe that's something that I need to figure out, honestly, because I want to get up on stage here in 2 weeks, Tracy, and I want people to walk away thinking that was awesome.
Hmm.
I like Ellory. I like his message and him as a person, and I want them to be impacted by what I have to
Hmm.
say, and as I think
Sure.
anybody who's going to go on stage would. And I get nervous that if I go up there and uh, what you said makes me feel better about it, but I don't want to use the term wing it, but that's kind of how I
Yeah.
see it in my head. I don't want them to have spent money on this conference. They didn't pay necessarily to see me come up there, but they come and they spend an hour. Well, it's actually 10 minutes, but they spend time out of their day
Right.
to come that they could have been listening to somebody else. They've flown all this way, they've driven all this way, and they've dedicated this time to listen to me, and I don't want to let them down. And I feel like if I go in and I've got 10 minutes. I can talk about blogging. I can talk about podcasting. I can talk easily just right now about how they fit together. I can tell my story. And I feel like if I don't spend this time preparing and rehearsing and practicing and memorizing like I see other people doing, I feel like I'm going to let these people down, and I don't want to do
Mm-hmm.
that.
But you need to maybe approach it like this is a skill set that you have a strength in that they don't, whereas there's something that they might just blaze through that you have to work through. And I mean, I'm the same way. I know exactly what you're talking about because I've sat down and thought, well, I really better crank out an outline, and I get in there, I don't even remember where I put it. And because I just don't work that way, because this is my thing, this is my niche. Now if it comes to building a Facebook ad, I've got every note in the book, I've got every window open, I'm going word for word. So I think that we're all just different. I think what becomes important is that you have, obviously you're very knowledgeable in the things that you're going to speak about. And you just have a real clear cut sense of what that's going to be and what you can put in that time frame. And that's actually the danger for people like you and me. Oh, you're giving me 15 minutes? Uh, well, you sure can't give me 2 hours and 15 minutes? Calling it down, bottom lining it because it's all important. I got to tell you about everything. So really that is what my advice to you would be. Your concepts, or if you don't, know which concepts you want to talk about. What will fit in 10 minutes? Take that audience into consideration. What are they going to benefit from the most? How do you want to lay it out? What's your introduction? What's your conclusion? Get it clear in your head. And if you're an impromptu speaker, good on you, mate. I mean, there you go. People would kill to be, well, they wouldn't kill, but people would love to be able to do that. Just like I would love to be able to be better at marketing or whatever. So don't let that become a hindrance. Don't let that, relish that. Ride that kind of like, pulling somebody away from a script. Ride the fact that you don't need it. You really have the confidence. And that's amazing. You were just using that script because you didn't believe in yourself. But now you do, and you see you can do it without it. And that's really great.
Yeah, whenever I talk to people who need the script, I just say, put it down. You know the
Hmm.
material and you know the story. And guess just like they use that as a crutch, I took maybe this, and I honestly, I think if it is a skill that I have, it only came about because, man, we in high school we got third place in the entire state of Texas. My no, we got second place my junior year and third place my senior year. We probably did better our junior year because we did the play so many times, and just that practice, and then doing the play before in front of ourselves, doing it in front of other schools and at the colleges up in the Sherman Denison area, and all of that before competition and during competition. It is that practice. And if it is a skill of mine, and I don't know 100% that I would claim it as a skill or a talent, but it comes, I guess, like you said, just from just the crazy number of hours that have been put in. And the last question that maybe it'll be the last big question, Tracy: storytelling. I know story is a big element to you. You have talked about it. It's part of captivating the room. How do we tell a good story?
I'm going to answer that, but I had a thought on what you just said before that. I just wanted to throw something in that all that
Sure.
practice, you laid that ability into your muscle memory, just like everything else. So you laid it in so nicely that it's your top layer. And that's why you draw from that. And somebody who's never, ever, ever given a speech before, they're not drawing from that same layer. They're drawing from a layer that says, no way. But anyway, I wanted to just throw that in. Storytelling. Yes, super popular, super everything now and will be. But like I said before, do you want to tell stories or you want to tell stories that change lives? Which means you've got to incorporate a few things. First, what I see happen a lot, not all the time, but a lot with my business clients, they pick the stories that make them shine, which is okay. But what is the story that is going to make your audience believe they're going to shine? We have to pick our stories according to who's listening to them. I could tell you 5 stories right now. One of them is you're really going to connect to because of who you are and what you do, and you're my audience right now. So I have to pick my story or stories really carefully because I don't want to tell story after story. Well, I do want to tell story after story after story, and that's part of the problem too. People tell too many stories. So pick your stories according to your audience and pick them wisely. But then you've got to tell all the parts if you want to captivate me. You can't just tell the victory. You can't just tell, oh yeah, and I was really broke and then I made $1 million. You have to tell me you got to tell the good, the bad, and the ugly, which can make you, well, and this is it right here. To tell the whole part of the story creates vulnerability because I have to tell you that I lived in my car and I'm not really happy about telling you that or whatever it is, you see. But stories are stories because people connect to them. Stories are stories usually because there was this horrible time and this victory time. What happened? What was your life like? What happened to change it? What was the result of that? What did you then do to get out of that mud hole? How did it work? How did you apply it? What was the result? What's your life like now?
Does every story, Tracy, have to have a beginning, a middle, and an end, a high point and a low point, the tragedy that you have to overcome? Does every good story have to have those elements?
I think it depends on what your end goal is. I think yeah, I'm hesitant to not say yes, but I think that they can be abridged versions of it. I don't think it has to be you have to give the full blown 25-minute version of how you ended up living in your car. But I think, it's important for us to know that you were making 162,000 a year and then you you blew it all on whatever, and then the next thing you knew, you were in your car, but you heard a voice that said, "Go make this call," and I called this guy. I mean, I do think that there should be parts of it. I think that we definitely need to have some element of the tragedy so that we can have the victory. If we're trying to teach somebody something, or certainly if we're going to sell them something, that's what I hear the marketing people talk about all the time. What's the problem and how are you going to fix it? Well, I had a problem. I was living in my car, but then I got into this program and my life changed forever. So I think that's kind of almost a hard answer in a way, because I think time frame becomes a part of it. You've got 10 minutes. You can't tell, and maybe you can, but you're probably not going to tell an 8-minute story. But what are the most
Mm-hmm.
important parts for what your end goal is? I'm trying to sell you something. I'm trying to teach you something. I'm trying to keep you from doing something. And what does your audience need to hear? What parts of that does your audience need to hear? And then how are you going to make them feel it? You're going to affect their senses with voice.
That makes a lot of sense to me, because not some tragedies are huge, some successes are
Hmm.
huge, and I see a lot of people trying to go for what you might call A-list podcast guests, the really big names in an industry. And I tell people, forget about that. No, I can't. So you will probably, if you haven't already heard of him, you have probably you will see him at Podcast Movement here in Dakota. John
Oh,
Dumas made
sure.
almost $500,000 in May.
Yeah, that's what I
I
keep
can't.
hearing.
99.9% of the world can't relate to that.
Right.
And even as down to earth as Pat Flynn, who's doing
Right.
the
Sure.
keynote,
Sure.
people can't relate to $100,000 a
Right.
month. And I said, forget all of these huge
Hmm.
success stories and talk to the guy down the street or the
Right.
girl next door and share their story of struggle. They might not have ever been bankrupt. They might not
Right.
have ever lived in their car, but they've got a lesson that we can learn. And when it comes to guests, I tell them to do that. And the same thing, I guess, applies to the story. We don't have to have this big, nasty, snarling dragon that we have to slay so he can
No.
become Prince
Mm-mm.
Charming at the end. But every struggle has the story, and that's that. So I did write out my intro, and I've written out maybe 2 or 3 minutes of the speech. I haven't finished it yet. And maybe based on this conversation, Tracy, I will do more bullet points instead of writing it all out and memorizing it and playing to my strengths of, I don't say improv, but
Impromptu.
just
Yeah.
there you
Yeah.
go. Exactly, like the table topics. I
Uh-huh.
never shied away from the Toastmasters
Right.
table topic.
Right.
Well, Tracy, you've given me such incredible, valuable information. I can't wait to meet
I
you in person in a
know.
couple
I
weeks. This is going
know.
to be
I'm
pretty
super
awesome.
stoked about it. I was stoked about it, but now knowing you guys that you're going to be there, and I'll look up the schedule, but I'm definitely going to seek you out and shake your hand. It's going to be really great to meet you.
I look forward to that and hope you will. We don't know the schedule yet for the big ones, the Saturday
Hmm.
and Sunday ones we do, but Friday afternoon we don't have that yet. So that may be in the program. Actually, that may even be before. Those may happen before registration. I don't know, but look for me.
I will.
I think I look in person like I do online. One of those people that's kind of the same.
Hmm.
You've ever met
Right. Yeah.
somebody
Yeah.
and like
Yeah. Oh,
that?
yeah. 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 And I do too. And I've got some of them. It's like I'll say it. Oh, well, the 40-year-old picture. That's good. Yeah, I know. Okay, great. Or whatever. And yeah, but no, I think I pretty much look the same too. So
Well, Tracy, it's been an absolute pleasure. Tell the audience, tell the listener where we can find you, connect with you, check out what I know you've got trainings, you've got downloadable resources, you do one-on-one coaching. Tell us where we can find more about you, and then where we can connect with you on social media.
Sure. Pretty much everything you need to know about my programs can be found at captivatetheroom.com. I do have downloadable courses, and I do one-on-one coaching, and I've got a 3-month voice program and a 1-month voice program launching here in just a couple of weeks that I'm super excited about. So it's all live training with replays, and we're going to cover all these bits that you and I started talking about today. People can email me at Tracy, Tracy, at captivatetheroom.com, but there's a pop-up on the website, Tracy A. Goodwin. That's where you find me on Twitter, and I have a Facebook page and a Facebook group, Captivate the Room. And would love to engage with everybody and teach them how to captivate the room every time.
Awesome. And we will put a link to all of those things in the show notes. You can head over to empoweredpodcast.com to check that out and find the episode with Tracy. I don't know the number yet, so I can't tell you exactly which / something. It'll probably be, if I get it out before Podcast Movement, Tracy, it will be a 93 or a 94. I don't know.
Awesome. Okay.
But I'm going to try to get this out before we head up from Austin to do that. So thank you for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. I love talking with you, and thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome, and I can't wait to see you in a couple weeks.
I'll see you soon.
I hope you got as much value out of my talk with Tracy as I did. I have always just kind of gone back and forth and debated, do I create an outline? Do I need to memorize? Am I not memorizing enough? And I wanted to know how I could give the most impactful, valuable, persuasive, entertaining speech that I possibly could when I go to Podcast Movement here in a couple of weeks. Now, you might be listening to this in the future, and you might have missed Podcast Movement this year, but at this point, I'm going to do my best to get that recorded and turned into a short, but hopefully value-packed podcast episode. If you are going to Podcast Movement here in just a couple of days, I am on Friday, Podcast Movement X. It's like TEDx, but PMX, room 1. My time slot is from 9 to 11:30 a.m. So check the schedule. I think there's a link if you go to empoweredpodcast.com/93 there in the show notes, which, by the way, you need to go to empoweredpodcast.com/93 anyway, because it's got a link to that blog post that I mentioned about how to work on your business instead of just in it. And check out that. It's got the audio blog all teed up and ready for you to listen if you're driving down the road. If you are going to Podcast Movement, I would love to connect with you. I'm already planning out what type of meetup we can have, where we can have it, and when we can have it. So pull out your phone if you're not already on it, and go to your keypad, type in 773-770-4377, and type in PM15 EVENT. That's PM15 event to 773-770-4377, and I will add you to the list. I'm going to message all of those people when and where we can meet, where we can connect, what we're doing, what we're up to, and I would love to meet you. Seriously, if you've been listening to the show for 5 episodes for 5 minutes, or well, it hasn't been 5 years, but if you are listening to the show, I want to meet you. That would make the conference, that would make my day and make the conference absolutely worth the expense and the time away from recording and writing. And I would love to meet you. So make sure you do that. Make sure you text PM event to 773-770-4377, and let's meet. Let's have a coffee. Let's eat breakfast. Let's have a sandwich for lunch or something like that, and let's get together. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Empowered Podcast. I'm your host, Ellory Wells. We'll see you next time.